The shadow went on exactly as taught. The liner followed rules learned 30 years ago at a department store beauty counter. And in the bathroom mirror with both eyes open, almost none of it shows. The crease work sits hidden under a fold of skin. The wing has printed a copy of itself onto the hood. But the hands did nothing wrong, and neither did the face. Those rules were written for a different eye, one with a taut lid and a visible crease. The eye changed. The instructions never did. These are 12 corrections that update them. Start with what moved. After 45, the skin of the upper eyelid, already the thinnest skin on the body, loses collagen and elastin faster than almost anywhere else on the face. The brow settles a few millimeters lower. The spare skin above the crease, with less structure holding it up, folds forward and comes to rest near the lash line. Dermatologists call the result hooding, and it rewrites the geometry of everything painted there. The visible canvas shrinks. The crease disappears the moment the eyes open. The surface changes too because thinning lid skin loses water steadily through the day, a process called transepidermal water loss, which is why a lid that looked smooth at 7 in the morning can show crepe texture by 3 in the afternoon. Every product on that lid is now working on a moving, folding, drying surface. The 12 corrections ahead move through 6 systems: shadow, liner, lashes, light, the brow frame, and the base layer underneath it all. 11 of them change what the eye looks like within seconds of application. One of them, sitting near the end of the list, is nearly invisible on its own, but it decides whether the other 11 are still standing at noon. And by the final minutes, a single pattern will connect all 12. Trick 1. A matte transition shade, blended above the natural crease. The old rule said shadow belongs in the crease, and that rule assumed the crease stays visible when the eyes open. On a hooded eye, it does not. The fold swallows it, so 20 minutes of careful crease work can vanish with a single glance up from the mirror. The correction builds a new crease slightly higher, on skin that stays in view. Look straight ahead into the mirror, both eyes open, and sweep a matte shadow 1 or 2 shades deeper than the skin through the area just above the natural crease, using a fluffy blending brush in small back and forth motions. The mechanism is light absorption. Matte shadows are built on soft powders like talc and silica, and those powders soak up light instead of bouncing it back, which is why a muted matte tone reads to the human eye as shadow. Shadow reads as depth, and depth reads as a recessed, lifted crease. Makeup artists who work on mature faces describe the technique as drawing the crease where it should be rather than where it is, and they draw it with the client sitting upright and looking forward, never reclined with the eyes shut. The effect in wear is immediate, and it lasts. The structure shows with the eyes open, shows in every glance across a room, and because the color sits above the fold instead of inside it, there is nothing for the fold to swallow by midday. The verdict is simple. Of all 12 corrections, this one changes the geometry of the eye the most for the least product, and it costs nothing but a repositioned brush. Trick 2. No shimmer on the hood. The old rule treated shimmer as brightness, and brightness as universally flattering, and on a taut young lid the rule held. The formula explains why it stops holding. Shimmer shadows are loaded with mica and pearl pigments, small reflective plates engineered to bounce light off whatever surface carries them. Light makes a surface advance toward the viewer, and shadow makes it recede. The hood is already the most forward surface on an aging eye, so coating it in reflective particles pushes it further forward, leaving the fold looking heavier in person and unmistakably puffy in photographs taken in daylight. But reflection is only half the problem, because pearl particles also settle. Within an hour of application, shimmer begins collecting in the fine lines of a crepey hood, and by the end of the day, every blink has pressed it deeper. So the finish that promised radiance is now tracing the exact texture it was meant to soften. The correction is a firm boundary. The hood stays matte always, in the same talc and silica family from trick 1. Shimmer itself is not banished from the eye, and it still holds two legitimate addresses on this list, both of them far from the hood, both of them coming later. Reviewers in their 50s and 60s describe the difference bluntly, reporting that the same palette can photograph a decade apart depending on where the reflective shades land. The verdict: after 45, Shimmer keeps its place in the makeup bag, but it loses its lease on the hood, the one address where a reflective formula reliably works against the face. Trick 3. Tightlining the upper waterline. The rule being retired says eyeliner sits on top of the lid, above the lashes, and the assumption underneath it is that the lid has space to spare. A hooded eye has no space to spare. Every millimeter of visible lid is precious, and a band of liner drawn across it spends that millimeter on darkness, visibly shrinking the eye it was meant to define. The replacement rule moves the pigment somewhere the fold cannot reach. Tightlining means pressing liner into the upper waterline, the damp shelf just beneath the roots of the top lashes, working in short dabs with a fine pencil while looking down into a hand mirror on the counter. The mechanism is an illusion of density. Filling the pale gaps between the lash roots makes the whole lash line read thicker and darker from the base, so the eye gains a defined frame without surrendering a single millimeter of lid. Formula decides whether the trick survives the morning. The waterline is wet tissue, and a soft kohl pencil rich in emollients, the buttery ingredients that make it glide, starts dissolving there almost immediately, drifting into a gray smudge under the eye within the hour. A waterproof gel pencil or longwear formula built on film formers behaves differently, setting into a thin, flexible film that holds against moisture from application to evening. Makeup artists who specialize in clients over 50 describe tightlining as the most invisible technique in the kit, and the wear test supports them, because a properly set tightline is still holding its ground 12 hours later while contributing nothing to the fold. The verdict: full definition at zero cost in lid space, provided the formula was built for a wet environment. Trick 4. A thin line that thickens only at the outer third. The inherited rule asked for one even line, corner to corner, and promised that thicker meant more defined. On a hooded eye, the promise inverts. An even, heavy line spends lid space along its whole length, drags the visual weight of the eye downward at the inner corner, where lift matters most, and disappears under the fold across the middle anyway. So most of the product is either doing harm or doing nothing. The update is a graduated line. Start at the inner corner with a stroke as thin as a thread, keep it thin through the center of the lash line, and let it gain width only across the outer third, the final stretch before the outer corner. The mechanism is directional weight. The eye follows thickness the way it follows an arrow, and a line that grows heavier as it travels outward pulls the perceived axis of the whole eye up and out, the exact opposite of the direction the hood is pulling. The outer third is also where the fold presses lowest and erases the lash line most completely, so the extra width there works less as decoration than as reconstruction, rebuilding a border the fold removed. In wear, the restraint pays twice. Less product along the inner two-thirds means less pigment available to move, so by late afternoon the thin sections remain crisp, while an old-fashioned heavy line would already be ghosting onto the lid above. The verdict favors quiet. The thick liner of earlier decades made its point loudly. On a hooded eye, the same point lands with a single deliberate widening at the outer third. Trick 5. A flick angled toward the brow tail, drawn with the eyes open. The old instruction was precise. Close one eye, pull the outer lid taut with a fingertip, and draw the wing following the line of the lower lashes. Every step of that instruction depends on skin that snaps back to exactly where it started, and skin with declining elastin does not. Release the stretched lid and the perfect wing crumples into the fold, breaks into a zigzag, or vanishes altogether. A wing angled along the lower lash line often points straight into the hood, where it stamps a mirror copy of itself onto the skin above with every blink. Call that print the transfer kiss. It usually appears before 10 in the morning. The corrected rule changes both the posture and the angle. Face the mirror straight on, both eyes open, and map the flick on the skin exactly as it sits, stretching nothing. Aim the stroke at the tail of the eyebrow instead of along the old trajectory, and keep it short. Many artists place a small dot at the intended endpoint first, eyes still open, then connect it back to the outer third line from trick 4. The mechanism is direction and honesty. A stroke pointed at the brow tail is the strongest upward angle available on the eye, and a line drawn on unstretched skin stays where it was drawn, in every expression, because it was designed around the fold instead of in denial of it. The difference shows all day. The flick reads as lift at 9 in the morning and still reads as lift at 9 at night, and the hood above it stays clean. The verdict closes the liner system. Drawn open-eyed and aimed high, the wing stops being the first casualty of a hooded eye and becomes its clearest line of lift. A brief pause before trick 6. This channel is Aging Queens, and this is the work we do here, taking apart what specific formulas and techniques really do on mature skin so that nothing in the makeup bag quietly works against the face wearing it. If these breakdowns are useful, subscribing keeps them coming, and more of them are already on the calendar. Trick 6, curled lashes every time, before anything else touches them. The old rule treated the lash curler as optional, a tool for special occasions, because young lashes usually carry their own upward curve. Age changes the lash itself. Lashes thin, grow in more sparsely, and increasingly grow straight or angled downward. And a downward lash does two unhelpful things at once. It casts a shadow across the eye, and it crosses into the territory the hood already occupies, closing the eye from above and below at the same time. The correction is mechanical and takes 10 seconds at the bathroom counter. Position a clean lash curler at the base of the dry, bare lashes. Close it in a gentle pulse. Hold. Then walk it outward toward the tips in 2 more pulses, so the result is a soft curve instead of a sharp crimp. The mechanism is the keratin the lash is made of. Keratin holds a bend once it is set into one, the same protein behavior that lets hair keep the shape of a roller, so a properly set curl becomes the lash's temporary new default. The consequence arrives before any makeup does. Lifting the lash fan uncovers a band of lid and a band of light, and the whole eye instantly reads as opened and raised while the products on the counter are still closed. But that curl is only alone because keratin also surrenders to weight and humidity, and the wrong mascara collapses it within the hour. Holding the curl is a formulation problem, and the formulation answer is trick 7. The verdict on the curler itself is unqualified. It is the least expensive lifting tool on this list, and on lashes past 45, it stopped being optional some time ago. Trick 7. Waterproof mascara, chosen specifically to hold the curl. Washable mascara makes a fair promise. It is a water-based formula of soft waxes and conditioning emollients, designed to wear comfortably and rinse away with warm water. And for a young lash with a natural curve, comfort is the whole assignment. But the same emollients that make removal easy keep the coating soft on the lash all day, and a soft, moisture-friendly coating sitting on a curled lash behaves like a slow weight. The curl from trick 6 starts dropping within the hour. By midday, the lashes hang straight again, and the softened pigment has begun ghosting off their tips onto the hood, leaving the small gray freckles that turn up in so many afternoon mirror checks. Waterproof mascara is a different machine. It swaps most of the water for volatile solvents and film formers, ingredients that flash dry into a light, flexible cast around each lash. And that cast works like a setting spray for the curl, locking the keratin in the lifted position it was bent into. The wear consequence is the whole point. A curl set at 7 in the morning is still standing at 7 in the evening, and the hood stays clean because a dried film has nothing loose to shed. But the strength carries a cost. Film formers do not dissolve in water, so removal requires an oil-based cleanser, and a patient, pressure-free soak, and dermatologists warn consistently that nightly tugging at the thinnest skin on the body ages it faster than most products ever could. The verdict is a trade accepted knowingly. Waterproof on the top, lashes for the lift, oil and patience at the sink for the skin, and the curl survives the day either way. 7 corrections in. The same shapes keep returning. Matte finishes appear wherever depth is needed. Films appear wherever hold is needed, and light appears only on purpose. The closing minutes of this video will name that pattern in full, because it reaches well beyond the eye. Trick 8. Brightened inner corners. The first of Shimmer's 2 remaining addresses. Trick 2, evicted reflection from the hood, and an eye stripped of every trace of light, reads flat and tired, which is its own kind of aging. The correction restores light in one precise place. The inner corner of the eye, the small triangle beside the tear duct, sits in a natural shadow pocket, and that pocket deepens over the years as the area around the eye gradually hollows. A single small dot of soft brightness placed there, patted in with a fingertip or the tip of a small synthetic brush, reads to anyone at conversation distance as rest and alertness. And because the 2 lit points sit at the inner corners, they visually push the eyes apart and upward, widening the whole arrangement. Formula decides whether the trick flatters or backfires. The particle rule from trick 2 still applies. The product should be a finely milled satin, a champagne or soft pearl with small, tightly packed mica particles that reflect gently, never a chunky glitter, whose large flakes catch in texture and scatter down the cheekbone by noon. A cream-to-powder formula earns extra credit here because it sets where it is placed and is still sitting in the corner through the school pickup and the evening video call instead of migrating. Beauty editors over 40 tend to rank this among the highest return gestures in makeup. 2 small points of light for a visibly more rested face. The verdict follows the same logic as any strong ingredient. Dose and address decide everything, and the inner corner is the address where a small dose of light pays best. Trick 9. A soft, diffused lower lash line instead of a hard, drawn one. The rule being retired, ring the whole eye in dark liner, top and bottom, and on a taut young eye the closed circle read as intensity. On a mature eye the same circle reads as offense. A hard dark line under the eye closes the shape, drags the visual weight downward in exactly the direction the hood is already pulling, and in its usual creamy kohl form begins failing almost immediately, because the emollients that let a kohl glide meet the natural moisture of the lower lash line and start to dissolve. Within an hour the line has softened. By midday it has slipped into whatever fine lines sit below the eye and printed them in gray, and as the displaced oils oxidize through the afternoon, the smudge turns darker and muddier than anything that was actually applied. The correction swaps the pencil for powder. Take a matte taupe or soft brown shadow, the Trick 1 family again, on a small fluffy brush, and press it gently along the lower lashes, heaviest at the outer third, fading to nothing well before the inner corner. The mechanism connects straight back to Trick 4. The lower weight now mirrors the upper one. The 2 meet at the outer corner, and together they point upward, turning the underside of the eye from an anchor into part of the lift. The wear consequence is the quiet one. Powder shadow has no emollient phase, so there is nothing to melt, and at 5 in the afternoon, there is nothing under the eye that was not placed there on purpose. The verdict: the definition stays, the drag goes, and the migration problem is solved at the level of formula rather than fought all day with cotton swabs. Trick 10. Lifted brow tails. The old rule said, follow the brow you have, and for decades, the brow could be trusted to hold its own line. It no longer can because the tail is the first section to go. Brow hairs thin from the outer end inward, and as the tail sparsens and the skin beneath it settles, the end of the brow drifts downward, pulling the perceived angle of the whole upper face down with it. The brow works as the curtain rod of the eye, because everything below hangs from wherever it sits. The corrected rule rebuilds the final third of the brow, slightly above where it currently falls. Brush the existing hairs up and outward with a clean spoolie. Then, with a fine hairstroke pencil or an angled brush and powder, extend and fill the tail so it finishes level with, or a touch above, the height of the brow's front, never below it. The mechanism is part optics and part formulation. Optically, raising the endpoint of the frame lifts everything inside the frame by association, before a single eyeshadow is opened. In formulation terms, brow products are among the most transfer-resistant items on any counter, built dry, waxy, or, in the case of tinted brow gels, on flexible film formers that set real hairs in place, which is why a rebuilt tail drawn at 7 in the morning is still holding its exact line at dinner, through every raised eyebrow in between. Makeup artists who work on mature faces treat the tail as the first repair of an appointment, rather than an afterthought. The payoff is out of proportion to the effort. 2 minutes at the mirror, and the eye area reads, "Lifted in every photograph taken that day." The verdict: on a hooded eye, the frame does more lifting than the picture, and the tail is where the frame was quietly losing. Trick 11. Eyeshadow primer across the whole lid before any color. If this list followed the order of application, this trick would come first. It sits 11th because it is the trick that decides whether the previous 10 are still visible at noon, and its work is easier to value once everything it protects has been seen. The habit being replaced is either skipping a base altogether or patting under eye concealer onto the lid as one. Concealer is the wrong tool by design. It is an emollient-rich formula engineered to stay creamy and flexible, so it never looks dry under the eye. And on a lid, creamy and flexible means mobile. The lid folds with every blink, thousands of times a day. Body heat keeps the emollient soft, and the concealer becomes a slow conveyor, carrying the matte structure from trick 1 downhill into the fold. Within an hour, the raised crease has thinned. By early afternoon, it is collected into a single dark line inside the natural crease, the exact place trick 1 moved it away from, and the transfer kiss from trick 5 has reappeared on the hood. An eyeshadow primer is built for the opposite job. A thin layer of dimethicone and film formers dries down into a slightly grippy, oil-resistant film, sealing the lid's own oils underneath and anchoring pigment on top, and on a dry, mature lid, the better formulas balance those film formers with light emollients so the finish grips without flaking into crepe. The wear consequence is the 8-hour test. Shadow applied over primer at 7 in the morning is still sitting in its original geography at 3 in the afternoon, edges intact, hood clean. The verdict: the least glamorous product on this list, invisible in every photograph, and the one that keeps the other 11 in the frame. Trick 12. One small pop of light on the center of the mobile lid, the second and final address where reflection is welcome. This is the finishing move, and it closes the loop opened back in. Trick 2. The mobile lid is the strip of skin that actually shows when the eyes are open, the part below the fold, and its center is the one place on a hooded eye where a highlight advances the right surface. The technique stays deliberately small. With the eyes open and the face straight to the mirror, find the center of the visible lid, then press a fingertip-sized point of soft satin shimmer onto that spot, over the matte structure and the primer, using the pad of a finger so body heat melts the product into the base. The formula rules carry over from trick 8, finely milled satin, cream or pressed, small tight mica, particles, no chunky glitter free to wander. The mechanism is contrast. A single lit point at the center of the lid reads as the rounded, light-catching curve of a youthful eye, and because it sits below the fold rather than on it, the reflection brings the lid forward while the matte hood above keeps receding. That push and pull, one bright point against soft shadow, is what a camera registers as dimension and lift. The wear consequence rewards the restraint. One pressed point of cream satin stays a point, still centered and still lit at the end of the day, where a wash of loose shimmer would long since have drifted into the fold and the fine lines around it. The verdict: small, precise, and last, the way a signature goes on after the letter is written. Now the pattern stated in full. All 12 corrections are one correction wearing different faces. Soft matte structure goes where the eye needs depth. Deliberate, finely milled light goes only where the eye needs lift. Flexible, long wear films replace heavy emollient creams everywhere the two compete. And every placement is decided with the eyes open, on the skin as it actually folds, rather than on a stretched canvas that stops existing the moment the fingers let go. It is the same conclusion this channel reaches in review after review of foundations, concealers, and powders, that mature skin is not asking for heavier pigment and more aggressive mattifiers. It is asking for hydration, flexibility, and sheer buildable coverage that cooperates with movement. The hooded eye was never asking for anything different. The instructions simply took 30 years to catch up. Aging queens will keep reading the ingredient lists and running the wear tests, one formula at a time, and the next brand breakdowns are already in progress. If understanding why a product fails on mature skin sounds more useful than being told to buy another one, subscribe and stay for what comes next, then say something below. Which of these 12 old rules were you taught first, and which one held on the longest?